Good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Finley, and I'll be your service coordinator today on this sunny first day of spring here in Middle Tennessee. It's great to see you all gathered online and in the sanctuary today. Later on in today's service, Reverend Denise will be sharing her message about faith and humanity during times of despair. To start, I'd like to invite Sandy and Larry up to the podium. Sandy, please, if you could, please light the chalice while Larry reads our opening words. Good morning. I'm sorry, Larry. Could you please unmute, please? Thank you. All right.
Do I need to repeat?
If you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
This was written by Suzelle Lynch, our chalice lighting. Each time we light the chalice, we renew our faith to our Unitarian Universalist faith. With the spark of a match, we make it new again. As fresh and surprising as the first day. We encountered this spiritual community and we realized we were home. We light this chalice for renewal of our faith.
Thank you. Our covenant is the silk that joins our congregation together in a web of interconnection. Please join me in reading if you are so moved. We covenant together to make a welcoming community, to walk together in the way of truth and love, to seek the life of the Spirit as it is known by each person, to support each other in thought, word, and deed as we work to build a better world. Our first hymn is number 108 in the Singing the Living Tradition, My Life Flows On in Endless Song. Please stand as you are able and join in singing at home or humming in the sanctuary.
My life goes on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the reel, the far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars? I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close? Songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to the rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When cleansed by shame are undefiled. How can I keep from singing?
For today's Time for All Sages, Claire has picked out a story to share with us. Good morning, Claire.
Good morning. So, as some of you know, and some of you are about to learn, March is Women's History Month. And this started in 1987 when Congress designated the month of March Women's History Month. So, this month we're celebrating all kinds of women and all the impact, achievements, and memories that they've made in American history. And one woman who's made a big impact is Kamala Harris, who is our current vice president and the first woman elected to that position. And this story is written by her niece, by Mina Harris, and it's illustrated by Ana Ramirez Gonzalez, and it's called Kamala and Maya's Big Idea. You know what should be out there? Kamala asked her sister Maya. Us, said Maya. A slide, said Kamala. And a swing, Maya added. A playground, they shouted together. Kamala and Maya had an idea. It was a very good idea, and a very big idea. They were going to need help. Wouldn't it be great if there was a playground in the courtyard? Maya said. That does sound nice, Mommy agreed. How can we make that happen? Kamala asked. Well, I suppose the first step would be to ask the landlord, the person who owns the building. So Kamala wrote a letter and Maya drew a picture, and they went to see the landlord to discuss the idea. The landlord thought about it for less than a second. No, I don't think so, no. That was not the answer they wanted, but they weren't ready to give up. That night, the sisters tried to think of ways to turn a no into a yes. They asked the other kids in the building if they wanted a playground in the courtyard. Did they? Of course they did. And they had ideas too. Let's have a teeter-totter and a basketball hoop and flowers. So Kamala wrote a longer letter and they went to see the landlord together. Dear landlord, right now the courtyard of our building is empty and no one uses it. If there were swings, kids could fly high. If there was a sandbox, kids could build. If there was a slide, kids could go so far, so fast. Can you build it, please? The landlord thought about it for less than 5 seconds. Now, a project this big is expensive. We don't have the money for that. Do your parents know you're here? This was not the answer they wanted, but Kamala was not ready to give up. If we ask our parents and do it all ourselves, can we fix up the courtyard? The landlord thought about that for a whole 10 seconds. Finally, he shrugged. If you can do it yourselves, sure. This wasn't exactly the answer they wanted, but it was a start. The kids all spoke to their parents about their ideas for the courtyard. They hung up posters and knocked on neighbors' doors. But they got the same answers from everyone. I'm sorry. Wow, that's a big job. Well, I wish I could help, which they knew meant no, no, no. But then Mr. Green stopped to talk. I work construction, and I could maybe get some scrap lumber and some sand for a sandbox. Really? Kamala said. Yes, exclaimed Maya. Well, okay, I'll try. It wasn't a yes, but right now, maybe was the sweetest word they'd ever heard. Maybe gave them hope. The next weekend, maybe turned into yes. The kids all helped measure, and Mr. Green cut the boards. Then they sanded and hammered and sanded some more. Then came the actual sand. They were all thanking Mr. Green when Ms. Lopez stopped to talk. I work at a garage. Maybe they have an extra tire for a teeter-totter. Another maybe. In the weeks that followed, lots of, I don't knows, turned into maybes and then yeses. No one could do everything, but everyone could do something. Kamala and Maya wanted everyone to celebrate the new playground, so they made another big poster inviting their neighbors to a potluck party. There were hot dogs and hummus, spicy chicken and potato salad, strawberries and brownies and lemonade. Mrs. Flores set up a sprinkler for the kids to run through. Mr. Green brought the music. Kamala admired the new playground, but she noticed there was still one thing missing. No one knew how to make a slide, but Ms. Flores knew where they might buy one. I teach at Emerson Elementary, and they are redoing their playground. Maybe we could buy the old slide? This was a different kind of maybe. How can we afford that maybe? But now everyone was trying to find a way to turn that maybe into a yes. But these brownies are delicious. Maybe we could have a bake sale. We can all bring toys and books and have a sidewalk sale. No one could do everything, but everyone could contribute something. When the slide arrived at last, Maya and Kamala got the first ride. The landlord was impressed. I want to shake your hand, girls, he said. You did a good job. You all did a good job. Kamala and Maya had an idea. It was a very good idea and a very big idea. And with a lot of help, they made it happen. Hooray for Kamala and Maya! Hooray for the Purr sisters! What's next, Kamala? Kamala, looking up, said, I'm wondering what the view is like from the roof.
Thank you, Claire. Now I'd like to invite all the children to follow your RA teachers to your room. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for your loving hand, your loving heart, your loving ways. Thank you for the gifts you bring into the world each day. And if you ever doubt yourself, remember us who love you well. We know all the gifts you bring into the world each day. So thank you for your loving hand, your loving heart, your loving ways. Thank you for the gifts you bring into the world each day.
Our Share the Plate partner this month is Sunflower of Peace, a US-based 501c3 registered nonprofit organization whose current mission is to provide medical and humanitarian aid for people affected by violence in Ukraine. Sunflower of Peace was founded in 2014, and since then has worked on empowering orphans, internally displaced persons, and recently those most affected by COVID-19 and the Russian military invasion of Ukraine. The directions for the various ways to donate are listed on the screen and in your Zoom chat window. We thank you for your generosity. For our offertory today, Fran will be playing a piece by Edwin McLean titled Nightfall. Good morning, Fran.
Thank you, Fran. That was lovely. Good morning. I'm the Reverend Denise Couch, and I have the pleasure and honor of serving as the minister of this congregation. I would like to introduce us to one of my, well, some of you may have heard some of this writer's works. Jan Richardson is a minister, United Methodist minister, who writes what I think are the most beautiful and wonderful blessings. And so this morning, I would like to lead us into a few moments of quiet meditation by first sharing one of those blessings. Blessing in a time of violence, which is to say, this blessing is always, which is to say, there is no place this blessing does not long to cry out in lament, to weep its words in sorrow, to scream its lines in sacred rage, which is to say, there is no day this blessing ceases to whisper into the ear of the dying, the despairing, the terrified. Which is to say, there is no moment this blessing refuses to sing itself into the heart of the hated and the hateful, the victim and the victimizer, with every last ounce of hope it has. Which is to say, there is none that can stop it, none that can halt its course, none that will still its cadence, none that will delay its rising, none that can keep it from springing forth from the mouths of us who hope, from the hands of us who act, from the hearts of us who love, from the feet of us who will not cease our stubborn, aching, marching, until this blessing has spoken its final word, until this blessing has breathed its benediction in every place, in every tongue. Peace, peace, peace. May it be so. Friends, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling heavy much of the time these days. I can hardly bear to watch the news or to read the headlines. I have family members who give me reports now and then on what's going on in the Ukraine. Maybe once a week I can read an article or two. There is so much. There is so much we are holding right now. I really want to reach for our topic. Our theme this month is reawakening faith. I want to have faith. I want to have faith in humanity. And I do. There's a great lot of hope. But as I was sort of working out on paper this sermon, there's this big gray and black cloud in one corner, in my starting corner. I do mind maps for sermons, so that starting corner is this despair now. And it is so many things. It's not just war. There was plenty of it there before February happened. There's oppression and our ever more complete, ever more evolving understandings of oppression and how it works and how many different ways it has been visited upon various groups of people. There is poverty. I worry that we're in the middle of a mental health crisis. I've been worried for some time because I have young adults at home. I've been worried about our young people and their mental health. And I am still worried. And I am especially worried now on this side of the last 2 years that they are suffering, that all of us are not having the things we need to thrive in community with each other, but especially our young people. And their brains are still forming. So this concerns me. I worry, of course, about war. I worry about the climate crisis. It is increasingly clear that we've passed some point where things are just, we're going to be able to pretend for very long that it's not, things aren't changing, that we don't need to pay attention. Poverty, economic inequality, which continues to grow. I know people were talking in the 80s about, oh, maybe watch out, something's happening here. And it's just the gap between the few who have a lot and the many who have maybe enough, and the vast, vast numbers of people who don't have enough, just keeps growing. And there's a rise of incivility, political unrest. I remember people talking over and over again for decades now about polarization, and but I've never seen anything quite like what we've lived through in the last several years. And there's a certain cultural poverty, I think, to white middle and upper class life. The culture of the white colonialists, as we are sometimes recently called, and I think that's a good term to sit with. Many of us, our ancestors, some of us, but our ancestors, various numbers of generations back. For some of it's rather recent, and for some it's centuries old, sort of came from somewhere else and just plopped themselves down here without much thought to who was already here, without much thought to, well, no, they did think a lot about what they were trying to build, but not much awareness of what they were doing to the world around them as they built this. And I kind of think that white American culture is kind of poor, and which is why we love exotic things. We love, I don't know. I had fun finding Ukrainian music. And I sort of blended over into some of the Slovak music. I'm Slovak mostly. So the Eastern European music, I don't know, it touches me in a way that some other sorts of things don't. But it's because I know nothing of that heritage. I know nothing of those ancestors. And I think our culture in general kind of cut itself off. We many of us, either were traumatically cut off or chose to come here and build anew something. And there's a lot of not knowing who we are and where we come from that then allows us to visit various injustices on other people and each other. And finally, that cloud of despair has a big corner that is the fear we carry both for our descendants and I think too of our descendants. We are afraid of our legacy. We're afraid of what we're leaving for them. We're afraid that maybe somehow they will not be enough, that they won't be equipped to meet the challenges they're going to face. And I think we're afraid of their judgment, because we live in a culture that's very focused on judgment and punishment and deciding who is to blame for things. And we know, if you want to talk in those terms, we are to blame for things. I've thrown away a lot of plastic in my life. And some of this, I think we're projecting our own sense of ourselves onto our descendants. And some of it is truly, we would hope to be better ancestors. And that's some of what we're going to talk about next week. But for just a moment, I just want us to sit with that despair. Because often I think when we feel despair or anxiety, we tend to, some of us, maybe all of us to different degrees, we tend to try to look for a thing to do, a plan to make, a thing to get busy about, to distract us. But this is hard. The last 2 years are hard. The last 4 years have been hard for many of us, and in many different ways. There are private and public griefs, and private and public ways that injustice and oppression work themselves out in the details of individual lives and groups of people. And this is a lot. And we are increasingly aware of more and more of it. These little computers we all carry around in our pockets bring us lots of stuff, and that's a good thing, and it's a hard thing. It's overwhelming sometimes. So, how do we find faith in humanity? Well, there are opportunities in this increasing awareness that we have, this awareness that brings us sometimes to the point of despair. But I'd like to read from an American Buddhist teacher named Angel Kyoto Williams about how the inner work that we do to center ourselves and to pay attention to who we are helps us with the outer work of living with grace and promoting healing in the world. So she writes this: my own awakening around my racism, both internalized and externalized, was through the Dharma. I'm not a person who was politicized elsewhere and then said, oh, let me map this Dharma thing onto it. I got it from the Dharma because I took seriously the inquiry, what is this thing that I shamelessly refer to as me? In the examination of me-ness, this construct of me, I think that what can happen is that white America can begin to recognize that we have this another me-ness, and it's this social me-ness, literally this socially constructed ego written into law. No one here actually came from some place called white. We have allowed a paradigm that was required to move the economy in a particular way and to privilege a particular people to take over our understanding of who we are and to cut ourselves off from love. This often strikes me as such an enormous opportunity for healing for white America, to allow itself to drop into this experience of what has happened. It's clear that that needs to be examined and seen. What has happened to you? What have you lost? What have you cut yourself off from? This construct is not you, and these ways of separation are not who you are. And I do think that that's a tremendously hopeful piece of insight, that for all the ways we could each of us populate that cloud of despair that follows us around, none of those things, none of those ways of seeing ourselves or of structuring our society are inevitable. None of them are who we are. They are the result of things that have happened to us, to our ancestors. They are the results of choices made in individual lives built up over time, but they are not who we are. They are who we have become sometimes. They are how we live in the world, perhaps, but they're not inevitably who we are and will be and must be. So some of this, I see this hope for something different to develop. I see within Unitarian Universalism on the larger scale. The UUA in the last several years has undertaken a commitment to center voices from people who are usually marginalized. And this is racially, but also in terms of sexuality and gender identity, disability, youth. That's always an interesting one. But in many ways, they're trying to pay attention to how we do or do not include a variety of voices in our desire to be an inclusive community. And I have found this to come with some really tangible, I want to say benefits. There are some nice things that happen in our public gatherings at the General Assembly of the UUA, for instance. The BIPOC, that is Black, Indigenous, and people of color leaders who often now are invited to speak to us or to lead worship for us, tend to address us as beloveds. Somebody got up a few years ago and said, I like to say beloveds because I appreciate what it calls forth in me and what it invites my listeners to. So you'll notice I often say beloved, or I'll write midweek emails and start with beloveds or dear ones or friends. I was raised kind of to stay a little more formal with people, to not do heartfelt things in public. But I think we need that now. And so I am very glad to have been invited into that way of being with people and being in ministry by these leaders. They also have demonstrated tremendous persistence and resistance and gentleness in being persistent and resistant, which I really, really hugely admire and am grateful for. The UUA has undertaken a couple of years back to study the Article 2 of the UUA bylaws, which includes our 7 principles, which you may remember the worship service that opened the month of February highlighted those 7 principles and suggested we all talk about the addition of an 8th principle. But those 7 principles are part of Article 2, which is, again, it's in the bylaws, and it says, here's what we all affirm, because as identifying ourselves as UU congregations. And here is what we understand to be our sources. There are 7 principles currently and 8 sources, which someday we should have a sermon on that. And then there's a statement of covenant, because ours is a commitment. Ours is an association that believes in covenant. We sometimes say we are a covenant-making, covenant-breaking, covenant-remaking people. We stole that from somewhere. We borrowed it. We use it. And so the Article 2 Study Commission was commissioned by the General Assembly, and they were charged by the moderators of the General Assembly to root their work in love as a principal guide, and to attend particularly to the ways that we in our root traditions have understood and articulated love and how we have acted out of love. And about a year ago, I think they've been working since 2017. I'm sorry, I don't have that date. It was somewhere around there, give or take a year. Last winter, they came out with one of their preliminary reports sort of along the way, in which they identify love as our common theological core. And I like that. That we will say the word theology publicly, because theology has often been the dogma about God, which is not a UU thing. We don't dogmatize. We don't say this is what we understand reality to be, and if you are part of us, you should figure out a way to come around to finding that acceptable. We just don't do that. We all think differently about truth. We all are on our own search for that truth. It's actually a very rigorous way of living. It's not a sort of, oh yeah, whatever, it doesn't matter. It does matter, but we all have to do our own work. So to say that Love is our theological core, is to say, whatever it is we are discovering or articulating about reality and what it might be and how it might work, love is the thing we agree on. Love is the central principle, the core. Another thing I really love is that we were doing this before we noticed and other people noticed this about us. Do you remember the standing on the side of love t-shirts? Now we use the phrase side with love because not all of us stand. Some of us sit in wheelchairs or are bedridden, but we can. So the campaign's been renamed Side with Love. But back in the day, in the 20 teens, the t-shirts were bright gold and they had big hearts on them. And they said, standing on the side of love. And what happened is UU started showing up in lots of different places to big public actions of witness. There would be crowds of these they're really bright gold. Like it's a color I look terrible in. Some of you would look fine, but it's really bright. It's something up around here. So they were very visible. And they had these big hearts on their shirts. And people started referring to us as the love people. The reporters would start looking for interviews with the love people or their leaders. The love people. Isn't that nice? And so I'm glad to see that the Article 2 Study Commission, again, this is a committee that's working on our bylaws, a possible revision of our bylaws, right? And they're saying, well, here's what we know so far. Love is our core. Love is our core. Now, this is not fancy. It's not heady, intellectual. It's not very specific in terms of bylaws, but it's a good place to realize, this is who we have become as a people. This is who we would like to remain as a people. And so I'm curious to see what will happen with the Article 2 Study Commission. We'll be getting another report at GA this year, I think. And I think having a vote next year. So there may, for instance, all the work that's been done about the 8th principle may very well be folded into the conversation about the current 7 principles and how they need to be revised. Because our bylaws say we will look at those. The bylaws in some other part of them say, if Article 2 has not been changed at all in a period of, I believe it's 10 years, then you need to start a study commission and think about changing it. We're a young movement, but they weren't always 7 principles, they used to be 6. And then we realized we needed a 7th, the interconnectedness of all existence, of which we are a part and only a part. I added only. But we're always growing and changing, and it's going to be time for a new rearticulation. I want to note for you that the commission has a survey online for individuals. If you identify as a Unitarian Universalist, and you can decide whether you identify that way or not, they would like to hear what you think about their work and about the article, the second article as it stands now. And they have a survey up online. If you go to uua.org and look for Article 2, you will find it. And that survey is open for public comments to be submitted through the end of April. So go and do that if you like doing surveys. So these are some hopeful things within our movement. Out in the wider world, there is so much going on. Oh my goodness. It's just amazing. Some of us here have been reading Defund Fear, which is the UUA's choice for a common read this church year. And it is a book about policing and prisons and how the way we do things now does not help anybody, really, how it ruins lives and tears families apart, and it needs change. And it's also a story of some people who are working toward that change. one of the stories in that book tells about a project in Richmond, California, which my understanding is in the Bay Area. It's a very poor area, really high crime rates. And the city decided in 2007, I think, to hire Devon Boggin to set up a new program. It was very innovative. The program tried to identify a smallish number of the people in a specific neighborhood who were most likely to commit crime and not be alive within a few years, basically. People they thought were most at risk of falling through the cracks in society, not flourishing, and being probably perpetrators of violent crime. And they hired mentors whose job was to go into the community, to be totally unconnected to the police, so that they could build relationships with these mostly young folks. And they gave them educational opportunities. They arranged field trips out of their community to see life in other places. And mostly they just hung out with them. They provided coaching and friendship and company, and had amazing, amazing results. The murder rate in that community went way down. I think, let me see, I'm doing this from memory. I think they said the cost of the program over a certain number of years was 1.5 million, and the savings that were realized because of the drastic, like 70% lower murder rate was like 500 million. Yeah, Larry has been reading with me. So 500 million for 1.5 million investment. And the Devon Boggin said, "Our theory of change is simple. I want them to desire to live." This is the guy who designed the program, designed a program to help people want to live. And guess what? They didn't just survive themselves. Other people survived too. The violence rate, the murder rate went way down. It's like, oh, there is nothing about our legal system now that allows us to operationalize this goal, to want everyone to want to live. And this is a tantalizing glimpse at what might happen if we shifted that a little bit. Another place that I see hope is in a conversation that's happening all over the place about accountability. There's also a conversation I've just discovered that's about trust. And it's actually sort of a little bit alarming because social scientists are discovering that trust is on the wane in American culture, which I hadn't really thought about. But as soon as I read it, I went, oh, yeah. I mean, there's lots of ways we don't trust. And they were looking at the economic impact. This is an article in The Atlantic several months ago. It was looking mostly at the economic impact of the lack of trust or the decline of trust in the corporate workspace with workers going remote. But apparently, like, we need to hang out with each other. We need to be able to trust each other. We need to see each other and have evidence that we see each other as competent and of basically good character. These are kind of nebulous, but we're primates. So, originally this article said that, the anthropologists tell us trust was first built by picking nits out of each other's hair. We need to be with each other. I understand after reading this article why so many church people for so many months have said, when can we get back together in person? It's lovely that we can stay connected by Zoom. And we love all of you Zoom people here with us this morning, or people on YouTube watching later. We are so glad that we have these tools to reach further. But it is important also for us to be together with each other. And I think about our children's story, and I'm so glad Claire found that story for us. It's wonderful. But there's this refrain in the story. I don't know if you caught near the end. No one could do everything, but everyone could do something. And we don't feel that when we aren't in close contact with each other. We have to kind of come and be with each other, to see the texture of each other's lives, to know none of us actually has the capacity to do everything we want, let alone everything that's needed. But we can all do something. We can all help. And if we all do something, it's like the old stone soup story. If everybody just brings the little bit they have, we can probably get dinner together. So this cloud of despair is here, and it is real. I read recently, this is in another, I seem to be reading lots of Buddhist stuff these days. This was in an article in Lion's Roar, which is an online periodical. I think they're in print too, by the Buddhist teacher, Trudy Goodman. And she suggests that when you're feeling fearful, which happens to all of us, when you are anxious, you don't know if you can handle it, if the world's going to fall apart, perhaps consider, this is so easy, and I haven't tried it enough to really be able to testify about it, but I think it could be quite powerful. If you could just note, now I feel fearful, get quiet and shift your body backwards, just an inch. Just an inch. That little shift, which she says is from leaning into the future, needing a plan, needing to know, and I've been there. We had water all over our building. I need a plan for when the building gets back together. I will admit that. But if I can lean back just a little bit, it allows me to be present in this moment, to be with what is right now, to be with myself, to be with you, to be with the people who will get a plan together. And it's a needing to be in charge, needing to get it right, needing to be perfect. These are all myths in our culture, that it's important to do all this stuff, to do it right. Maybe all we need to do is be here, at least in those fearful moments. That might be helpful. So I'm going to be trying this. I'm going to be trying to notice when I need to get quiet and just lean back. And I'm going to see if an inch is really enough. I think it might be, which is very odd. I think we don't use our bodies as tools enough. I'm on a journey trying to figure that out, how I can leverage that. So I invite you to just, when that black cloud of despair seems to be taking all your energy, just get quiet for a minute. Let it be. You don't have to talk yourself out of any of that, but just be quiet, take a breath, and lean back one little inch. Try that out. I want to close with a poem from Adrienne Maree Brown, who is an American person of color, who's a brilliant community organizer. And she's a really great, very prolific writer. Her book, Emergent Strategy, has been very popular lately. You may have heard it talked about. She also has this wonderful blog, and there's a poem entitled "Something is Ending." You want to argue with me on the internet. You feel judged by my coping mechanisms. It's all misunderstood, my love. Listen, so many have died, but we are still alive. Argue all you want. You're still here. I'll defend nothing. I'm still here. We both know something of living. I promise I don't know more than you, and I mostly don't think I do. I promise. And you don't know more than I do about reaching for tomorrow from this blessed broken body, mind, or spirit heart. Still, I am learning every day. Simple things like how to breathe, to love without controlling, to admit I have been wrong. I am learning every day not to apologize for each breath or hearing the call of joy. Even here in the ruins, I feel the thrum of life. Even in your corrections and bickering, all I hear is each one of you saying, I'm alive. I exist. I want to live, and I hear you. All I see is how much you want to be seen, vibrant, special, nobody's fool, free, and I see you. All I know is death is not our enemy. Time is no accident or prison, but the gift of life. Being right is not a permanent state. It's logical to be obsessed with living and to be flooded with fear. Crawl beside me back into our ancestors' arms. Do you argue with invisible strangers because no one else will listen? Look, even wrong, you're someone's miracle. We might all be a single sacred mistake, but we are still alive. Every time I feel lost, frustrated, stuck, angry, or overcome by despair and grief, meaning every day, every single day of this slow and fatal end time, I find my eyes in a mirror and whisper, you are still alive. And to each loved one, we are still alive. Our adaptations unfolding from our undeniable need for each other. Yes, something is ending, but it isn't us, love. The future is not something they can steal, or you can win, or I can win. It's at the intersection of every argument. It's in the resistance to every oppression. It's in the generosity that bursts through hoarding. It's the impulse to save each other from the sharp corners of a full life. I see you trying. I hear you singing in dialectical chorus, echoing our own kind of forever. We live, we lived. We live, we lived. We live, we lived. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Denise, for that wonderful message and that reminder to lean back through all the everything that is going on in the world. Our next hymn, everyone please stand as you are able and sing or hum. This is hymn number 1023 from Singing the Journey, Building Bridges.
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. With all of our voices and all of our visions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such reach out to me. With all of our voices and all of our visions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such reach out to me. With all of our voices and all of our visions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such reach out to me. With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
For all of our visitors, first I'd like to welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'd also like to ask you to please consider filling out a visitor's card before you leave so that we may add you to our email list. For those of you joining us in the sanctuary, the cards are located at the welcome table near the doors. And for those visiting via Zoom or YouTube, we have a digital visitor card located on our website. The link is on the screen and in your Zoom chat window. Thank you. And now we've come to our time of joys and concerns. For those of you joining us on YouTube, thank you again for